The Second Industrial Revolution was an important time for the further development of mass production and transportation of information. During this time period, it can be observed that scientists and inventors were discovering new methods for more rapid and cheap communication and transportation. As the Industrial Revolution blazed forth, many outcries arose. Many advancements in steel, chemicals, and electricity industries paved the way to new possibilities in production during the Second Industrial Revolution. Before this time period, steel was still expensive to produce. However, during the Second Industrial Revolution, an inventor named Henry Bessemer discovered a way to mass-produce steel by using a Bessemer converter. This process made new forms of transportation possible, most significantly railways and cars. Chemicals also helped mass production become more successful during the Second Industrial Revolution. For example, in the textile industry, cloth would get bleached by exposure to sunlight or treatment in sour milk or stale urine, which was hard to do fast. However, with the creation of sulfuric acid and bleaching powder, this could be done more efficiently. Bleaching powder specifically was very important for the mass production of textiles, as it was the discovery of bleaching powder by Charles Tennant that spurred the creation of the first great chemical industrial enterprise, as quoted from medichem.org, but also as it was cheap and could be produced easily. Electricity also had an impact on the new possibilities in production. Although steam previously was the best power source for factories, once electricity was created, it brought new industrial productivity levels never seen before. When electricity was first developed, it was used as a way to power industries and transport the electricity from place to place. Quoted from Steve Blackman, in the early 1800s, the work of Nikola Tesla led to the development of alternating current and direct current technologies, including batteries and cross-country power. At the time of the Second Industrial Revolution, electricity became the main power resource for industries. With this new popularization of electricity, new ways to transmit waves and sound were discovered, which in return led to the creation of new industries involving media, such as the radio industry and telecommunications.
Due to the German state's promotion of railroads, a railroad system for Germany was developed. This rail system drastically increased the demand for steel and coal. The coal fields in Ruhr Valley made Germany the biggest producer of coal. With this, a major steel and coal industry was developed. This expanded the banking and capital markets available to Germany. This would even help other industries like the chemical and electrical industries. At the time, Germany's chemical industry will become the most advanced in the world.
And now I will tell you exactly how advancements in transportation and communication affected trade, migrations, and global interactions. First of all, the development of the steam engine by James Watt in the 1760s and 1770s allowed later inventor Richard Trevithick to create a high-pressure engine used for boats, railroad trains, farms, and road vehicles. Once railroads became popular in Britain, passenger traffic dramatically increased, leading entrepreneurs to build lines between major cities and small towns. In the 1840s, the U.S. was greatly affected by railroads, sporting 6,000 miles of track from Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Baltimore, and later on, tracks across the Appalachians to Memphis, St. Louis, and Chicago. This opened up the Midwest to waves of immigrants who built farms on the prairie and created a large internal market for manufacturers. Railways also sparked the iron, machinery, and construction industries in France and Prussia. Railroads could also move bulk goods more quickly and cheaply than other forms of land transportation. The creation of the electric telegraph led to the introduction of a 5-wire telegraph in England in 1837. An American named Samuel Morrison said, "If the presence of electricity can be made visible in any part of the circuit, I see no reason why intelligence may not be transmitted instantaneously by electricity." Inspired to achieve this goal, he introduced a code of dots and dashes in America that could be transmitted with one wire. By the 1850s, telegraph wires covered the eastern US and western Europe. A submarine telegraph cable crossed the English Channel, and railroads were made safer and more efficient with telegraph wires sending messages of departures and arrivals of trains. This new network connected the globe with telegraphs that took minutes to send. Telegraphs also made an economic impact when they made markets more efficient and profits more dependable by allowing producers to stay on top of consumer needs and prices. And that is all you need to know about how advancements in transportation and communication changed trade, migrations, and global interactions.
Leading on, the effects of the Industrial Revolution as a result of rapid advances in the creation of steel, chemicals, and electricity, they helped fuel production, including consumer goods and weapons. For many, the shift from rural to factory life was exhausting, especially for children. For example, child labor was a common feature of the Industrial Revolution, with children as young as 4 working in dirty and dangerous conditions without protection from the government. The overall health of the workforce declined because of the harsh and unhealthy conditions of the factories. People lost money and the employment rate rose. The working hours during this revolution dropped to a record low since the work was beginning to be automated. Not only were the streets and waterways heavily polluted with human waste and garbage, but the air was also heavily polluted because coal was easily the most used fuel during the Industrial Revolution, since it was needed to power the newly developed steam engines. The workers were bound to lose their livelihoods since they were being replaced in the industries by machines that had come up to improve efficiency in the operations.
Industrialization and mass production was a concept never heard of before, and its subsequent reactions varied depending on who was asking. To begin with, we do see women enter the workforce. However, this time period began the domestication of women, the idea of women in the kitchen, men at work. Because of this, if women ever worked, they'd work inferior jobs where they were paid much less than their male counterparts, as it was assumed women would have a man to support them anyways. Some women did not take lightly to this ideology, added with the general inferiority that they had been dealt thus far. From this rose the start of the women's suffrage movement, a movement to allow women an official voice in political matters. Industrialization also brought about an increased urban population and density. There was no way to safely dispose waste, and people lived crammed together. Not only this, but factory owners gave none to little care for the safety or health of their workers. Workers eventually started to come together and talk about the unfair hours of work or low pay, and at times would all unite together on a strike against the companies. These strikes were devastating, as without workers, the factory owners could not manufacture. These unions marked the beginning of a rise in power amongst the working class. As for the slums, the poor areas where the workers lived, reports began to come out about the horrifying conditions which led to municipal reforms including public education, garbage removal, water, and sewage systems.
Capitalism and socialism are economic systems that countries use to manage their economic resources and regulate their means of production. They both differ in meaning but share a similar status in economies. Both are two primary economic systems that are used to understand the world and the way economies work. The fundamental difference between capitalism and socialism lies in the scope of government intervention in the economy. Capitalism is a market-driven economy. The state does not intervene in the economy, therefore leaving the job up to market force. It is an economic system where private individuals or businesses, rather than the government, own and control the factors of production. The property of businesses are owned and controlled by individuals in capitalism. On the other hand, socialism is characterized by state ownership of businesses and services. The state owns and controls the major means of production. In contrast to capitalism, the socialist model's primary concern is a fair redistribution of wealth and resources from rich to the poor. Out of fairness and outcome. In a socialist economy, the state is the primary employer.
Industrial Revolution that began in Europe around 1750 led to imperialism over Africa and Asia. You see, before the Industrial Revolution, engines, machines, and factories did not exist. Just about everyone had to grow and hunt their own food, had to make everything their own, such as clothes, homes, and tools. They would also have to travel by foot or by horse, and of course, the wealthy would travel by carriage. When the first few major inventions that began the Industrial Revolution was introduced to Great Britain, the steam engine and spinning jenny were widely used throughout Europe. The steam engine was used as an engine for trains and machines in factories. The spinning jenny, as I said before, was a key innovation in the Industrial Revolution too. The device was used to reduce the amount of work needed to produce cloth, being able to use less spools. European nations pursued an aggressive expansion policy that was motivated by the economic needs that were created by the Industrial Revolution. In this document by Louis W. Hine, he talks about the child labor in factories. This document dates back to July 1909. He starts off the document stating that children will work long hours in factories quite often. He states his opinion on the child labor by saying it's bad for children to work in this haphazard way. Hine brings up the idea that children should be playing and loafing. Instead, they'll be doing that one day, and then the next they'll be working long and tiring hours with little to no sleep, which is very dangerous for children. Hyde even speaks with one of the directors in the factory, learning that it's a general rule for them to hire children and females without a permit, then later force him to get one. He also brings up the idea that it's very dangerous for people in general to be working around unguarded belts and wheels, which is a menaceful trap for innocent people.